Well, in here is the pit house. In the pit house is where all the people used to come and live in the winter time. And in Hulkmalan language, the pit house is a scummel. And when you come into the pit house, it's called scummel. Hulkmalan language is very complex, sort of different language than most of the Aboriginal languages that you'll see across North America. In here you'll see usually about 50 or so people living in here. This is about the average size home of a pit house, a normal pit house that was found. So you can see there's spaces in between for all the individual families that sleep. So your mom, your dad, your siblings, and then the next space between the two logs right there would be your aunt and uncle, and so on and so on. And when you live in here, of course, you wouldn't see the fancy wood walls, the wooden benches. You'd see dirt walls, dirt benches, and, of course, a dirt floor. So all that would be packed dirt, and you'd live in here for the whole winter. And when you'd live in here, he'd actually take your entire longhouse apart, so that when the raiders, the West Coast people, so like the Haida, Tsimshan, the Gitxsan, when they would come through in the winter, they would come by through the river, and if your family hadn't taken your longhouse apart, then those warriors would know where you're staying, where you're sleeping. So they'd wait out in the water, wait out in the river until they saw movement, until they saw your family going in and out of your pit houses. So if you took your pit house apart, or your longhouse apart, all the warriors would go right on by and leave your pit house and your home and your family alone. So from there, when you'd be living in here, you'd think you'd have a fire, like this one here. But the fire normally would not be lit, because that would let the smoke go out through the smoke hole. Right there. And so the warriors would know where you were staying if they seen your smoke. So that's why you'd have all your preserved salmon, like your wind-dried, or your smoked, or your salted salmon, and all your meats, all your teas, and your dried berries, all your vegetables. So, and it was very warm in here anyway, even today. Even this modern pit house, when it's hot outside, it's very cool in here. When it's cold outside, it's very, very toasty in here. So you never ever really need a fire. The only time that you'd need a fire is when your home got cool. But the reason that your home would keep warm is that this floor that you see here, this cement floor, would actually be made out of 3 layers. Those 3 layers would be, of course, that first layer being packed earth, packed dirt that the kids would run around. They'd run around all the way around the floor, packing down this earth, packing down that floor. And then from there, you'd have a thick layer of sand. Now that layer of sand is actually going to absorb all the heat from the sun. So from there, you have another layer, that layer being mud and clay. So when that mud and clay would harden and cool, it would stay nice and cool in the summer, and the sand underneath your clay would be soaking up the heat. So then that sand would keep all the heat in until you had to move in here for the winter. And then, once you built your pit house, or wanted to build your pit house, all these logs, all the logs that you see all around the roof, all the big beams, would have had to been harvested last year, giving them time to cure and dry, so that when you're ready to lift them up, they'd be a lot lighter. So even really big ones, like this one you see here, would have to be lifted up by hand, or with ropes, like a pulley system. And then from there, all the women, because the women were the ones that would dig for the roots that we'd be cooking in the cedar baskets to cook for our food. They'd dig the hole, and then the children would take. So you'd take what we call our digging stick. So you can see it's got a very narrow end. And then you jam this into the ground and turn it and turn it and turn it until all the ground would break apart. From there, all the kids would get down on the floor, on the ground, and you'd scoop up all those clumps. And then after that hole was dug out, all the men would notch all of these logs and cut them so you can see where they rest. And then once the floor was done and the beams were up, you'd make a door and a ladder so that you could get in and out. The door would never face the river. So this one here is actually facing the river where the warriors would be able to see where they are. This door, this main door here, would actually be back there where that bear is. You dig up on an angle so that the hole is facing the mountain and it's not facing the river, so that it would look like a natural hill. And then once you've completed your smoke hole, you would make yourself a ladder. This ladder, you would notch. You'd take one whole step out. So you might take this step out so that it's completely flat. So from the side, when you're looking up, all these steps will be there, and then one will be completely flat, so that when a raider would come down in the middle of the night, usually in the winter, because no one would move around in the winter, they'd stay in their village, that when they would come down this ladder, in the nighttime, they'd miss this step, and then they would fall onto the fire if it was going. And that's the pit house.